celebrate Black History in Wales. It's Black History 365, but we're launching this in the month of October, which is Black History Month. And today with me on the hot seat, this final week, we have the brilliant, the powerful, the indefatigable Roger McKenzie. This guy is just too much. People saw your name, Roger, and they've been going mad. So for those who don't know who Roger is, I just want to tell you a bit about him. Roger went to Tottenham College and is now the College of North East London. He became the first Black National Education Officer of a UK trade union when he went to work for the National Union of Civil and Public Servants, NUCPS. So he worked there and worked through the merger of the union to become the Public and Commercial Services Union, that's PCS. And during his time as a councillor, Roger served as the chair of the Leisure Committee, and he was also chief whip for the Labour group. And soon after the death and the murder of Stephen Lawrence by racists in the south of London, Roger left PCS to become the Trade Union Congress, or TUC, Race Equality Officer. And during that time, he was the secretary to the high-level TUC Stephen Lawrence Task Force, and a task group aimed at rooting out institutional racism from within the trade union movement. He was responsible for bringing about the very first TUC equality audit and to change the rules of the TUC to make sure that they promote equality, and that became a condition for membership of the TUC. He has done so much. He led a trade union delegation to the United Nations World Conference Against Racism in Durban, South Africa in 2001. And after 4 years at TUC as a race equality officer, Roger became promoted to Midlands to become the regional secretary of the TUC. He's the first Black person in the TUC history to hold a regional secretary post. And Roger was recognized in 2010 when in 2010 he was appointed by that union to be an assistant general secretary responsible for organizing recruitment and union's education program for members. He's held this post since that time and has helped to oversee Unison as well as the TUC or whatever. All these unions are under Roger. That's what I'm saying. I don't know about all of you. And Roger attended the prestigious Harvard University Trade Union Program in 2008, where he met and took lessons from leading figures such as Howard Zinn and Noam Chomsky. And the following year, he was awarded a well-deserved, I have to say, OBE for his services to equality and diversity. Ladies and gentlemen, on the hot seat today, I give you the inspirational, and I have to say, irreplaceable, Roger McKenzie, OBE. Now, people, this man is on my chair and I'm getting too excited. I want to hear
that was the best introduction I have ever had, ever.
You can take me with you, Roger, to be your shout-out person.
Absolutely.
So, people, I know you're the first person on the hot seat that has had a question sent even before you came on the hot seat. So people are really looking forward to welcoming you. So tell us, Roger, how did it all begin for you? Did you want always to be a leader? Did you see yourself as a leader? And did you just think, well, I'm just going to be the top of everything? How did it begin?
I don't think I ever saw myself as a leader. I saw myself as somebody who felt it was important to do certain things. So, for example, when I was born and brought up in Walsall in the West Mids, and when I left school, I left school on the Friday, started work on the Monday. By the Tuesday, I was given the job of the subs collector for the union. And in those days, you still had wages in your actual packet that you were given. And I remember my job was to go around on the Friday when people got paid and to try and get money. off people to pay for their union subs. I didn't get a penny, but what I got was a load of abuse of people. So it was all my life. It's been about trying to do what I thought was right, in the face of quite often abuse, racist abuse, racist attacks. So for me, it was just about having a clear idea that certain things needed to be done. If I could always get people around me to try and get things done, then that was always the preferable, because together we're stronger rather than trying to do things individually. If I always saw that as the key for me, rather than me being in leadership, but because I can get up and I can talk, as is going to be obvious during this discussion. Because I can talk, then you get asked to do more things, and you get asked to bring other people on with you. And for me, that's an important part of leadership. And I dare say we'll talk about that later on. But an important part of this whole thing for me isn't necessarily what you do, but your ability to be able to bring other people with you and alongside you. And not the strongest leaders that I've ever seen are people who've got people next to them rather than behind them, frankly.
Absolutely. And now that is incredibly powerful, bringing people with you. And not many of our leaders are like that. You see people criticizing Black leaders all over the world. What was it that made you want to take people with you? Because that is a very difficult journey to have people around you when you're already being browbeaten and bullied and racially abused, like you said.
Well, I think it's something that lots of us as Black people kind of experience, that we find out that you can do so much on your own, but you're actually in a better position to be able to get things done if you're doing it collectively, if you're doing it together. I mean, let me give you an example. So the first time I was ever on strike happened because I was a young painter and decorator in Walsall, and this particular employer promised to pay me a particular amount of money on my weekly wage, and then reneged on it. And I said, no, this is what you promised me, and that's not what I'm getting. And that he cursed me out in racist terms and said, well, if you don't accept it, then you're sacked. And I said, you can't sack me because I'm in the union and I'm on strike. Right. So literally I walked out of his office, grabbed a piece of cardboard that was sitting there, grabbed a pen from somewhere, I don't even know where it was, and wrote on it, picket line. And I went and stood outside that place, and I was on strike for a week on my own. Right. And what won me that strike, because I did win it, was that people wouldn't cross my picket line, even though it was unofficial, really. They wouldn't cross my picket line to deliver paste and paper and paint. So they ran out of those things. So I learned from that you're stronger if you stand together collectively. And that's why I've always thought that it's important that you bring people with you alongside you, rather than try and be the big I am and I know everything, because personally I don't know everything. And a good leader for me is somebody who listens to what people have got to say. Sometimes you have to take tough decisions, but I think any leader worth their salt is prepared to actually take the best of what's around them, not be threatened by really good people around them, and actually bounce ideas off those people. But in the end, sometimes you are the one who has to take the decision, and you have to do that, but you should do that from the best position of being able to rely on all of this expertise around you. You only do that if you're prepared to bring forward really good people. And I know a lot of people, I know leaders who are quite threatened by really good people around them, so they don't bother.
Yes. That is such an interesting concept. I mean, Roger, so many people have researched you even before you came today. The leader of our Yemenis community, who's a regular on the hot seat, his name is Reggie. He said, as your mom and dad were trade unionists, Did your mom and dad have any influence on you doing what you did, as your dad worked as a rail worker for 30 years? So
Yeah,
did they have any
yeah,
influence
absolutely.
on you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, before we went out to work, I mean, we were brought up in a terraced house, and the terraced house, the front room of the house was like the kind of best room. Nobody went in there really. It was only when really important people came round or important conversations were going to take place, that you were took into the front room. And I remember the weekend before I started work, my first ever job, and my dad took me into the front room and he said, "Start work on Monday, join a union." Right?
Wow.
He said, "Join a union, but don't just join a union. Become a rep in the union. Get involved. Don't let people speak on your behalf. You speak. You've got a voice. We've given you a voice. We've told you to say, to speak plainly to people, but always with respect, and always speak to people with respect. But join a union and get involved."
Yeah.
Dad was a railway worker for 30 years. Mom
Yeah.
was a cleaner in most of the jobs that she did, but she was a shop steward as well in her job.
Wow.
And they always instilled on all of us labour values
Yeah.
of collectivism and standing together with people who are being harassed, people who are being downtrodden in the workplace, actually being downtrodden anywhere. That was a real big thing for us when we were growing up, that you
Yeah.
never turn away from people who need you. Never.
Absolutely.
Our job is to stand next to people when they need
Yeah.
us.
Wow, what a strong upbringing. Your
Yeah.
father certainly reminds me of my dad. In our home where I grew up in Nigeria, my the limitations were put on the black and white television that we had. They dictated when you could watch it, and when you could sit on the chair there to watch it, it had to be something special. So it's a bit like your front room. And
Yeah.
just the influence of good parenting, how important it is for us people here in Wales and around the world who are watching this today, who are raising children, to remember to instill in them those leadership qualities from the very beginning.
Well,
So that's really powerful.
one of the things that about parenting, that that when I think of my mom in particular, Dad was always working. And one thing about being a black worker on the railways, particularly during the 60s and 70s, when my dad was working into the 80s, was that you got all the night shifts, and it was endless night shifts. So we actually never really saw that much of my dad, but we saw Mom. Mom was the kind of main person for us, the matriarch, if you like, of the family. Now, given that my mom was so important to us, imagine what it feels like when your mom says to you, "You have to come, you and your brother, you have to come and meet me after work." So she'd do a cleaning job at the town hall. She'd go over the road and do a cleaning job at the health authority. You have to come and meet her because she was getting attacked in the street, right, by
Gosh.
racists. So
Wow.
so when you know that is happening, and your job is to stand and protect, stand in front of your mum,
Mm.
because frankly, that's the least I could do for my mum, is to stand in front of these racists who were harassing her after she'd be working, finishing the second of her two jobs.
Wow. And
Um,
this has been a hallmark of your leadership, Roger. You've distinguished yourself in the United Kingdom because you've taken this mantle of leadership seriously, and you stand in front of the voiceless and shield for them and speak for them, because many people truly haven't got that voice. And it brings me nicely to the fantastic comment that was sent in even before you sat on the hot chair today, Roger. And this is from absolutely fabulous Chuka Iwobi. This is, you didn't know that Alex was our relative, he's our
no,
nephew. And this is Alex's father. He's never missed a day of anybody on this hot seat. So he said, Roger, it is always inspiring to listen to people like you who lead from the front. We are grateful to Uzo for getting you on this platform to share your experiences. So in spite of your very busy schedule, you received, and this is in spite of your very busy schedule that you're here, then you received your OBE in 2009 in recognition of your services to equality and diversity. And we're delighted that you're getting the recognition you so rightly deserve for the challenging work that you're doing. The issue of institutional racism and inequality in our society are age-long, and our ancestors faced the same humiliation and frustrations we now face. Do you honestly think that there will ever be a time when we look back and say that the battle has indeed been won? Or do you think that this is a battle that we will fight and then fight and pass on to our future generations to continue to the fight from where we have stopped? Is this an endless battle? Roger, over to you.
I think that is an amazing question. Thank you so much. I mean, that is just hits the nail on the head, because far too many people, I think, we get too many false dawns. So if you remember, we're obviously in the run up to a US presidential election. And I remember when Obama was elected in the States, people are saying, well, that's kind of, it's a new dawn, it's a new day. Maybe that's the end of racism. We've achieved this thing, and it wasn't, and far from it, far from it. So I tend to think it's the latter of that question, that basically we continue to fight, we continue to organize, we continue to stand up, and then we pass the baton on to people from where we are at any given time. What is, I think, really important to remember about that is that where we get to at any particular time, it doesn't take very much to push us backwards. Right? It really doesn't take too much at all. So we have to build, wherever we get to, we have to build firm foundations to wherever we get. And I think you build those firm foundations by building, involving people, building a movement, rather than just saying you have these kind of savior leadership people who are, the kind of messianic leaders. I don't think that works at all, because if you think about where we are now, while we have to deal with a lot of racism still today, and we still have to deal with loads and loads of challenges, it's different. I wouldn't say, it's just a different position to what went before. So what our ancestors had to deal with in colonialism, what our ancestors had to deal with when people are raiding our villages to enslave us, it's different. It's a different battle, but in a different place. So for me, I think it's such a brilliant question, because we must remember that the battle, if we ever stop being vigilant in the battle, then we fall backwards. Too many people told us that the battle against the far right had been won, again, when the National Front were around. And we thought there was a period when there was nothing really, high profile going on. And then the British National Party emerged, and then we had to deal with that. Then they've waned a little bit, and you've now got Britain First and other organizations like that. So all of these organizations spring up, and it's a bit of a roller coaster. It's a bit of a to-in and fro-in. But what we can never be is we don't have the luxury as Black people of not being vigilant, because literally, as we've seen with the Black Lives Matters stuff, this literally is a matter of life and death for us. I'll tell you one story that happened. It involved my mum, and this was more than 50 years ago. This happened, and she told us a story of walking down a street in Walsall, and she was pregnant. It wasn't a particularly dark night or anything. There was other people around, but she got attacked in the street, and she was in a really bad way, and she nearly lost the child she was carrying, which was me, right? And those sort of attacks were taking place 50 plus years ago.
Wow.
Those sort of things are happening today.
That's
It's
right.
a different place, different environment, but in lots of senses, the same battle. So we can take things forward. And when you think that there's some of us are able to do, like leadership on the hot seat, some of us are able to be senior within, the trade union movement. You're a professor. There's very few black professors around years ago. There's more now, not enough. There's more of us in Parliament now. There's more of us in, like the Synod as well, in the Scottish Parliament, so you can look at it and say, well, some of us have made progress.
Yes.
But you look beneath it, and you see the same old racism is still there. It's just in a different setting. So we make progress, we stay vigilant, and we pass on the torch for people to continue that fight. We give them the skills, we give them the experience, we give them the shoulders to climb on, right? So that they can continue the fight.
Absolutely. Well, Chuka says that is the most outstanding answer, and he's really encouraged and thanks you for answering him.
No, I thank him for asking that question. It's a really important question.
See? So if you are going to come to Everton, you might say hello to Chuka. He might save you a seat next to him.
No, it's a bit difficult at the minute because I support Aston Villa and we're just behind it.
No.
We're just behind Everton.
I had you up. I had you up here. No. If you're supporting Alex, then you're welcome on the hot seat. Yeah, there we go. So Reggie sends you a second question, and he says, can you tell us a bit more about that first strike that you talked about and how you took industrial action as a painter and decorator? How did it make you feel when those employers said to you to accept those terms because it was racially abusive? So he wants to know how people like you have led the way for us and other young leaders who are like him, Reggie, pushing. What is it? What has that done to you? What did that experience do for you, Roger?
Well, I kind of did what I did out of something that you should never do as a trade unionist, right? So I'm not putting this forward as the sensible thing to do, right, at all. But I did what I did out of anger and I'm known in my family as being perhaps the most stubborn person ever, right?
Well, that's good.
Well, it kind of works as a trade unionist as well, to be stubborn, but it doesn't always work. But I was stubborn, and I don't like people who tell lies ever, right? And I also don't like people who threaten me, and that's what that employer did. And I certainly don't like people who use racist language at me because I dig in. I remember when I was at school, just came into my head that Roots was on the telly.
I remember Roots.
And we used to come into school, and at first we used to get we were in fights every day because of Roots. Fights every day because people started calling some of the black kids Kunta Kinte and Chicken George and all of that sort of stuff. And we got together, clubbed together, and said, no, we're not putting up with this nonsense. We are fighting back, right? And we organized together to fight back against this stuff. So we got angry at first, but we turned that anger into organization. It's a basic organizing thing, actually. It's called anger, hope, action. It's and so you get angry about something, and then you have hope that you can do something about it. And for us, that was stand up against that employer, stand up against the racists within the school, and then take action against it, the action that we actually took. So for me, with that particular strike, it was because I got angry and I was stubborn and all of that. But also the stubbornness let me stand outside that workplace, because what I didn't tell you before about that is not a single person who worked in that workplace was on strike with me, also, and they crossed my picket line every day, and some of them gave me abuse pretty much every day as well. But what helped me was other people outside of that workplace who said that they weren't going to, that they would not cross a picket line.
Yes.
Right. And in those days, there were many, many more trade unionists around. So how did it make me feel? Made me feel humiliated, but
Yeah.
also made me feel really determined, because that's how I was brought up. We don't put up with injustice in our family.
Yes.
We were always told, stand up for yourself,
Absolutely.
and that people will attack you. People will, because of the color of your skin, people will attack you. If you don't stand up for yourself, they will continue to attack you. So you learn really quickly. You can either try and deal with those things on your own. If you try and deal with them on your own, quite often you're going to get wiped out.
Yeah.
But I won that dispute because of the collectivism from other people. But what I've learned else over time is that we are so much stronger together. And if we stick together, you won't always win, right? But if you don't stick together, you pretty much always lose, really. Pretty much
Absolutely.
always. So it's
Well,
really important that we stick together always.
there's so many people clapping for you. People are saying, I love it. I love it, Roger. Enough respect. Big love hearts for you. And I think this is really classic, because you are a nationally celebrated leader. I remember when we were appointed to the Centenary Commission as commissioners, and I walked into the room, and there was my brother Roger sitting right there. I was like, woo, I'm in good company. Roger, your leadership journey has taken you far and wide. I have heard you orate. I'm not talking about a speech, orate at conferences. So much so, you've had standing ovations where other people have had fairly lukewarm claps, because you speak from the heart. You stand up for people who have no voice. You stand up for people whose rights are being trampled on. That has been your hallmark as a leader. And that is so powerful to all of us who are watching your leadership journey. Can you tell me, what are the 3 top tips that you have gleaned as a leader, a remarkable leader of high standing in society? What are the 3 top tips you're going to give to emerging leaders that they should also emulate?
It's a really, really good question. I think one of the things that I would say is stick to your principles. I think it's really important to have principles, first of all. But what your principles are, stick to them. Now, I'm not saying don't be unbending, and not take advice and not be willing to learn from other people. I'm not saying that at all, because I think a leader needs to do those things. But what I think is really important is that we have to have principles that guide us, moral principles and political principles, whatever. So for me, that is pretty important, that you're not just vacuous, that you're not just moving with the wind all over the place. So for me, that's important. Second thing that I'd say is be prepared to surround yourself with the best minds,
Yes.
and be prepared to listen to those people. So I don't know which is the toughest thing to do, because you can listen but you don't hear. And I think you need to hear what people are saying, and be prepared for that you might not always agree with it. Too many leaders, I think, are kind of not willing to have critical voices around them. That's not me. I like the idea of being able to bounce ideas off people, and then being able to do that. For me, as long as it's done with respect on both sides, then that's fine. But for me, that's important. So surround yourself with the best minds and be prepared to listen and hear what they've got to say. The other thing I'd say is also be prepared. Your learning journey never ends. And I think, just because you're in a leadership position, don't ever get into the trap of saying, well, we 20 years ago we did this, and that's out, and therefore that's it now. There's no point in trying that again because it didn't work then. Maybe there was something that we didn't do quite right in that thing. but also we've always got so much to learn. And for me, part of learning that for me, which is one of my joys in life, apart from Aston Villa, which you don't like, but
No.
I
And
love.
Everton and Swansea.
but for me, apart from the football team and my music, I love my jazz music as well. Apart from that, and my family and all of that, the big joys for me is reading, right? And for me, that's how I learned so much. It was one of the things that really developed my activism within the trade union movement. I remember walking by a bookshop in Walsall. Well, it wasn't even a bookshop, it was a second-hand shop. And at that time, we didn't actually have a single bookshop in Walsall. But we had as a second-hand shop. And I remember, and I didn't usually walk by this particular way into town. And I walked by this and I saw a book, and it was a very, very startling book, because on the front of it was it was clearly a woman and a big afro, and it was Angela Davis.
Wow.
And it was the autobiography of Angela Davis. And I thought, I've heard of her.
Yes.
I'm gonna go in and buy that. And when I went into that bookshop, I also found, I don't know how they got these books, but next to it, I hadn't seen it from outside, was a book called Seize the Time by Bobby Seale. So I bought both of those books, and I read both of those books until the books have nearly been fallen to pieces, and I haven't got rid of them at all, because they just inspired me. And my house, my wife is always saying to me, "You've got too many books. You've got too many books." And I say, "You can never have too many books. We haven't got enough bookshelves, basically." So you have to keep learning as a leader and be prepared to learn. You don't know it all as a leader. No leader I've ever met, and I've met some of the greats, some really great people. Guy called Bill Lucy, who's my mentor, was the person who organized the Memphis sanitation workers strike of 1968, which was what Martin Luther King Jr. was supporting when he was assassinated. That's why he was in Memphis. And he's my mentor, and I talk to him all the time. And he's one of the most humble people that I know, and with so much experience, but he would tell you that he never stops learning, he never stops reading. And that reminds me that I should never think that I know it all, because I don't. And I have to be prepared to listen to new ideas as well as reinterpret old ideas, maybe.
Oh, do you know, as you're speaking, it really, resonates so strongly with me, because many of the people that I talk to are terrified of being overtaken by smart people that they bring around them. So they surround themselves with people that are yes people, that they are much better than, who they can drive and they can push. But I really do love your 3 top tips. And, just for those who are joining us now, 3 top tips on leadership from Roger is, they are stick to your principles, not that you shouldn't be unbending and not take advice. Don't be vacuous, but you need to be principled, but be prepared to listen to the advice of others around you, and then make the right decision to the best of your ability. Surround yourself with the best minds and listen and hear those people, because you can surround yourself with the best minds and still follow your own advice exclusively. So don't shoot your own foot. Listen to the people who may know other things better than you do. And finally, keep on learning. Read books. Honestly, Roger, many times people say, especially Black boys, that they don't often want to read as much as their counterparts. Have you found, I mean, you've talked about the fact that you're always reading, you're always informing yourself. You talked about the concept of a mentor. I was mentored by men and women. And I really, really, and I was mentored by a white man. And I was mentored by a white woman as well as African women. I've had so many mentors in my life. How have you find that role of mentoring?
Well, I mean, my mentor is, I mean, so smart and has kind of rescued me out of many situations, because what he does, he doesn't tell me what to do. He just kind of prompts me to find the way myself, and I
Yes.
think there's a real skill in that. I think there's a great amount of training that needs to be done to be a mentor. A lot of experience as well. I've seen some people who call themselves mentors who wouldn't work for me, but they might work for other people. And I think part of what people need to do with mentors is find the person who they think would work best for them. So
Yes.
I don't think I've seen some mentorship programs where you're kind of given somebody, really. And what I did with Bill Lucy, I just asked him, would you?
Yes.
Because I saw what he did.
Yes.
His kind of journey as a trade unionist, as an activist, and the way he carried himself. And I'm still learning all of that about how, just the need to carry myself better sometimes in certain situations. Happy to, I think it's really important that we kind of identify our own challenges as well that we need to do.
Yes.
And for me, sometimes I need to slow down. Sometimes I need to, just remember who I am and where I come from.
Yes.
And I think it's I'm not sure I'd make the best mentor in the world. I'm happy to do it if people want me to. What I try and do all the time, and I suppose this is mentorship in a way, because people from all over the place ring me up and say, well, what do you think about whatever? And I'm happy to help them, by saying what I think, but also just to, be there for people if they need me, for any bit of advice, but also just to be there, just to encourage people. I many years ago, I joined the Labour Party in the early 1980s, and one of the people who was mostly responsible for me joining the Labour Party was the legendary Tony Benn, who I got to know a little bit as well, and really admired. And he always said that you must encourage people. You must encourage people. And he said he wanted it put on, I don't know if he did in the end, but he wanted it put on his tombstone, that he encouraged us. And that's what I would like to do, to be known as somebody who always encouraged people to stand up for themselves, to take an active role, to be there for other people, and to do the right thing, stand up for social justice, stand up against racism. But the key for me is not to be silent. We haven't got the luxury of being silent in these times. It's too tough for us. But it's really, really important that mentorship isn't a bureaucratic thing. You fill in forms and all the rest of it. But it's actually where we can be there for people when they need us.
Absolutely. And I think something you talked about, the fact that he never, pushed things down your throat or told you what to do. In my experience, that's actually mixing coaching with mentoring. So where they draw the responses out of you, and they know you know what to do, but they talk to you in a question that causes you to investigate your own self and your own head, what the solutions can be. Can you tell us, because people think, wow, what kind of challenges would Roger face at this age and at this stage in his life? He's such a huge leader. Everybody looks up to him. Can you give us an example of a challenge, a difficult challenge that you've had to overcome? And how did you do that, applying your leadership skills?
Well, because I'm still black.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a short answer. So I mean, we're still black, and people and it's still the first thing people see of us. It doesn't matter how good we are. I was talking to somebody earlier today about this, actually, where I remember Yeah, there's an old saying, isn't there, that we have to be twice as good as everybody else just to be seen as the same, and
Yeah.
that hasn't gone away. It hasn't gone away. There's things taking place at the moment in my life, in my professional life, that I'm having to try and prove myself, where somebody white wouldn't have to double prove themselves as I have to do about my politics, about my trade union background, about my ability to do a job. You know, we are often so qualified to do things, and yet we have to overprove. Never mind double prove. I mean, it's more than that. Sometimes we have to overprove that that we are worthy, and in the same position as us. No white person would be asked to do those things. It just doesn't happen, and they can moan about that being as much as they like. People can moan about that, but it's an absolute fact for Black people in this country is that we have to deal with racism pretty much everywhere still. We have to deal with people giving us the side eye, you know, and we walk into conversations, they give you the side eye. It's almost like, well, what are you doing here? Are you here to serve the tea or the coffee or something? What are you doing around this table? You know, I can't tell you the amount of, you know, I met loads of, I don't understand like everybody in the trade union movement's horrible, because they're not. I've got some really, really close friends in the trade union movement, people I totally respect, but there are still too many people around who talk about it, but don't actually do anything. They wear their Black Lives Matter comments like a badge. It's like, it's the latest fashion, so they can put their badge on and they can take it back off again when the next important thing comes along.
Yes.
And I'm fed up of that, frankly, and it's something that I have to put up with. I've had to put up with all my working life, actually, where people make their, you know, well, particularly a conference. You know, there's some conferences that I've been to over the years where a drink goes inside some people and their true colours come out. It really does.
That's true.
But also, when I've been excluded from things far too often, from meetings, from rooms, from being able to do things that were my responsibility to do. I've been excluded from those things far too often. The thing that gets me through it, again, is that stubbornness, because I won't be downtrodden. But also, I'm an organizer. And as organizers, you have to build something to be able to stop these things from happening, not just to you, but to the next person behind you as well, who's trying to come through. So we have to be, as you are, I know you're doing such fantastic work in Wales. You know, we have to, and it's not a kind of trumpet blowing thing, but we have to create the space for people to come through. And sometimes that's hard for us because we have to take the knocks.
Absolutely.
That's what our ancestors did for us.
Yes.
Our parents, our grandparents, all these people, that's what they did for us. And that's what we have to do. And it's not easy.
No.
But sometimes you have to be the first one through the door, and take the abuse, take the difficulties that go with that, so that it's easier for the next person to come through.
That's right.
And there's so many examples across the Black community, people doing really, really well, who are able to either do that because somebody before did the hard work, so that they could even get nearer. Never mind walk through the door, but so they could get a few steps nearer. And that's what I've had to do. And I do it very consciously sometimes, because you look at some situations and you think, you know what, there's no Black people there. And you think, you know, do I really want to go through this again? Right.
Yeah.
And then you remember your ancestors, that they're actually tapping you on the shoulder and saying,
keep going.
get going. You know, that's why I did what I had to do. Go on.
Exactly.
Who do you think
That's
you are?
true.
What gives you the right to not do it? Get on.
Absolutely. Do you know, Roger, we are all so proud of you.
No, we're
Um,
proud of you too, by the way. So many people are so proud of what you do.
thank
You're
you.
an absolute inspiration, the work that you do. Totally.
Thank you so much, Rod. Well, Reggie says, I love how humble our dear brother, you're a brother now to everybody in Wales.
Absolutely.
Our brother Roger is. I think he would make a brilliant mentor as he's real and he connects with real grassroots and every other person. I think the wonderful thing about you, Roger, is that you're able to dine with Tony Blair, with Gordon Brown, with Boris Johnson, I dare say that name, and talk to him.
Draw the line somewhere, right?
I draw the line. I draw the line. But you are also there with the grassroots. You are there knocking doors with, individuals in, local community groups, even white local people, Black local people, Asian local people. You are a person who champions all disadvantaged people. And I think that is the power of what you are. You fight to stand up for the voice of Black people everywhere. You stand as a testament to leadership in the Black community, and we're so proud of you being there and speaking for everybody. So many messages of goodwill, so many messages of wow, what an inspirational man. We want to see what next Roger is going to be. We look to Downing Street. Roger, are you hoping to be
No,
prime
I'm trying to do. Looking at another role at the moment.
I know.
That is be inappropriate for me to talk about, but
no.
I'm a trade unionist, and that's my thing. I'm a trade unionist who wants to stand up for working people. But also for me, that means standing up for people, not just where they work, but in their communities as well. And for me, that's really, really important. Now, can I just say one thing, right? Because years and years ago, I met talking about meeting important people. I met the great trade unionist Jack Jones. And it was the morning I was going to give a speech at Labour Party conference. And I went down to breakfast, and it was a bed sit, and in a B&B place, and I was really nervous, and I went down, and there was just Jack Jones down there with his friend, and he just invited me to have breakfast with him, and I'm just like, that's Jack Jones, the legend, right? One of my heroes, right? So I'm sitting there, and we're having breakfast, and he said, so are you going to speak at conference this week? And I said, well, actually, I'm really nervous, but I'm actually going to speak at conference later on today. And I'm quite nervous about it. And he said, do you mind if I give you some advice? And I thought, well, Jack Jones give me advice. I thought, yeah, please go ahead. And he said to me, some people get listened to because of the positions they hold.
Yeah.
Other people get listened to because of what they have to say.
Yes.
Right? And what my advice to you is, make sure that they hear you. And that's why I speak the way that I do in meetings. It's because people need to hear what you have to say, and they have to know that you mean it, and that it comes from the heart. So I never use notes when I speak, ever. Apart from the fact my eyesight's rubbish and I can't follow it properly. I just decided when it was stopping me from doing it, I just thought, well, just three things. Get in my head three things that I'm going to say, and stand up and say it.
Honestly, it sounds so full of research, and I've listened to so many of your talks, Roger, and I've never seen a piece of paper near you. It just shows how much is in there. Roger, we have exceeded our time on the hot seat, but we had to hear that story with Jack Jones. That was superb. And we wish you all the very best. I think the sky is your limit. People ain't seen nothing yet with you, Roger. I believe the best is yet to come. And where you take that position, that mantle of leadership right at the top of wherever it is you're going, and then you inform people, energize people, and inspire people with all these leadership truths that you've shared with us on the hot seat today. We wish you all the very best, and let us know whatever is happening next. We want to invite you back later
Oh,
next year
please, that would be
on the hot
fantastic.
seat.
That would
When
be
you are
fantastic.
cruising that top sail, it's going to be awesome. We wish you all the very best. Now, everybody, I'm sure you will join me in thanking the fantastic, indefatigable, outstanding Roger McKenzie for his honesty and his truth on the hot seat today. That brings to an end a month of meeting every week on a Thursday to interview leaders in the Black community. We're back to our usual hot seat once a month. And next month, guys, the man who I'm so excited to bring to you is Lord Charles Allen of Kensington. And he is one man that I seriously, seriously admire. He was the chair of the UK host of the Games, the Olympics. The brilliant showcase piece that happened in London was all chaired and overseen by Lord Charles Allen of Kensington. And he is going to talk about his experience as a chief executive former of EMI, of Sony, of Global Food Industries, and now a member of the House of Lords. So next month in November, we're going to be back on the hot seat with another brilliant leader. So a big cheer to you, Roger. Top marks. Thank you so much for joining us on the hot seat. Woo! Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Taiwo from Vivid Block IT Services for streaming us today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.